imagine spending like 30 years of your life just raising 6 children.
Right, a literal lifetime.
Yeah, a lifetime.
Yeah.
You pour your money, your sleep, your youth, your entire heart into them. You go to all the games, you bandage the scraped knees, you pay for the braces, all of it.
Invisible labor, yeah.
Exactly. And yet, statistically speaking, when you reach your 70s and your world inevitably starts to shrink, only one of those 6 children will regularly pick up the phone to call you.
It's a brutal reality.
It really is. So today, we are taking a deep dive into this heartbreaking kind of unwritten ratio of family dynamics. We're looking at a pretty massive stack of sources today.
Yeah, we've got personal notes, psychological breakdowns.
And some fascinating excerpts from the 35-volume Bomar Books Library, all to understand what they call the quiet math of love.
Which is a profound and genuinely jarring type of math to look at, you know? The equation simply doesn't balance.
No, it doesn't at all.
You put a lifetime of care into a system, and the output you receive at the end of your life is just drastically disproportionate.
Right. And the origin of today's deep dive makes this so painfully real. The author of our sources actually received a spontaneous message from a senior citizen about this.
Yeah, and this is an elder who noted having 46 children and descendants in their orbit?
46.
Right, 46. But they pointed out this devastating ratio that it honestly stopped me in my tracks. 2 parents to 6 children to 1 caller.
It's so heavy. They care for all 6. But in the twilight of their lives, that communication just funnels down to a single child.
And the sources are very careful to frame this, right? It's not just one family's isolated tragedy. It's an archetypal pattern.
Yeah, the elder's message felt like almost like a download from the collective consciousness.
Exactly. It's a dynamic that repeats across cultures, across socioeconomic classes, across generations. Parents pour out their lives, but the return flow is completely bottlenecked.
Okay, let's unpack this. Or, wait, let me just say, my immediate gut reaction, and I bet the reaction of anyone listening to this right now, is to instantly judge the 5 kids who don't call.
Oh, absolutely. It's the natural reflex.
It is so incredibly easy to label them as selfish or ungrateful or just, bad kids. But as I read through the psychological breakdowns in the stack, they make a very strong case that this isn't merely a moral failure.
No, it's not. It's a highly complex convergence of psychology, biology, and family systems. The quickest way to misunderstand this entire phenomenon is to assume there is like a caregiving gene that just randomly fails to activate in 5 out of 6 children.
Right, like they're just born without it.
Exactly. The reality is driven by systemic mechanics. It starts with what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility.
Oh, like the bystander effect.
Yes. If you're familiar with the bystander effect in public spaces, this is essentially the family edition of that.
So in a public emergency, if there are 50 people watching, nobody calls an ambulance because everyone assumes someone else in the crowd is already dialing 911.
Right.
How does that map onto a family living room, though?
Well, think about the math of a 2-child family versus a 6-child family. With 2 children, each child unconsciously feels mathematically on the hook for, say, 50% of the parent's well-being.
Makes sense. It's just you and your sibling.
Right. But expand that to 6 children, the psychological weight dilutes drastically. Each child now feels only about 16% responsible.
16%?
Yeah, and the internal monologue isn't necessarily malicious. It sounds like, my older sister probably called mom this weekend, or my brother lives 10 minutes away, he's got it.
Or like, dad sounded totally fine at Thanksgiving, so no need to bother him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They are outsourcing their guilt to a ghost.
Outsourcing to a ghost. That actually reminds me of, it's like a chaotic group project at work, but with way higher emotional stakes.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. You have a team of 6 people. Everyone assumes somebody else is putting together the final presentation slides. So literally nobody does.
Like, because everyone thinks the other guy's on it.
Yeah. The friction of assuming someone else has it handled means the work just sits there until one person finally panics the night before and just does the entire presentation themselves.
And that panic, that realization that the structure will collapse if they don't step in, is exactly what creates the role the sources call the designated keeper, or sometimes the responsible child.
The designated keeper.
Yeah. In almost every large family system, one child unconsciously inherits the role of the family's emotional anchor. And the parents often reinforce this by only calling that specific child for their needs.
Which is so tragic because the parents often just lower the bar, right? They accept the silence of the 5 and say, well, at least we have one. which effectively makes one child bear the emotional weight of two aging parents.
Exactly. They become the bridge between the aging parents and the rest of the lineage.
But wait, I have to push back on that a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Is it really just that the five who don't call are casually dodging the work? Because making a 5-minute phone call isn't exactly hard labor.
Right, it's not physically exhausting.
No. So is that it? Or is there an emotional cost they're dodging? It feels like there has to be something they're actively avoiding, not just a logistical hassle.
You're hitting on a crucial layer there. It goes much deeper than just casual delegation. We have to look at the concept of emotional economics.
Emotional economics. Okay, break that down for me.
So, a phone call between an adult child and an aging parent is never just a simple, neutral transaction of information. It is heavily weighted by the perceived emotional cost of that interaction.
Okay, so if the cost of dialing the phone is too high, the child just, what, bankrupts the relationship.
Pretty much.
But what is making that cost so exorbitant for the five who stay away?
Well, if a conversation with a parent is simple, regulating, and validating, people will generally pick up the phone. But if that interaction is loaded, if it carries the weight of unresolved childhood narratives, perceived favoritism, old family hierarchies.
Or even just subtle, lingering criticism?
Yes, exactly. If that's the case, avoidance becomes a highly rational coping mechanism. It's unfortunate, sure, but it's rational. The five who don't call might not be cruel. They might just be carrying unspoken grievances.
So every time they hear their father's voice, they might not hear a frail 80-year-old man. They might still hear the harsh disciplinarian from 1995.
Precisely. Dialing the phone means actively opening a door they've maybe spent decades going to therapy to close.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Or, conversely, they might just feel like they were part of a generic unit growing up. In a house of 6 kids, it's easy to feel like you were parented as a herd rather than seen as an individual.
Right, the middle child syndrome, but magnified.
Yeah. But beyond the historical baggage, the sources also identify something called the empathy gap, which ties directly into the avoidance of aging itself.
The empathy gap. Unpack the mechanics of that for me. Why does aging specifically trigger this gap?
Because witnessing physical decline in a parent shatters a foundational psychological illusion. Think about it. Our entire childhood is built on the premise that our parents are invincible giants.
Oh, for sure. They're the ultimate protectors.
Right. When you are 5, your dad is Superman, but when you are 50 and you see Superman struggling to open a jar of pickles or forgetting where he put his keys, it is terrifying.
It forces the adult child to confront not only the parent's mortality, but their own, right?
Exactly. The psychological cost of holding that paradox, the giant who raised me is now helpless, is so heavy that the child's brain simply chooses to avoid looking in the mirror. It triggers immense guilt and feelings of inadequacy.
So they distance themselves just to preserve the illusion of the invincible giant. That is profoundly sad.
It really is.
But then, what about the one who does call? The designated keeper. Are they just like perfectly adjusted, enlightened beings who have no childhood trauma?
Not at all. And the irony of the one who calls is fascinating.
How so?
Sometimes they are the child who actually needed parental approval the most, and they are still unconsciously seeking it.
Oh, wow. So it's not always just pure altruism.
Right. Or other times, they might be the only sibling who remembers a specific, quiet moment of warmth in a chaotic house. A moment the other 5 completely missed.
That makes sense. Different kids get different versions of their parents.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is that the sources point to physiological factors that actually differentiate siblings, even those raised in the exact same environment.
Wait, physiology? You're saying their actual biology, like their nervous system, dictates whether they pick up the phone to call their mother.
It dictates their baseline capacity to handle the emotional friction we just talked about, yeah.
The sources note that even identical twins can diverge in their capacity for empathy.
Really? Identical twins?
Yes, the one who calls might literally possess a more active anterior cingulate cortex.
Okay, we need to translate that. What does the anterior cingulate cortex actually do in this context?
Think of it as the brain's emotional Wi-Fi antenna. Okay, I like that.
In one sibling, that antenna might be highly sensitive, constantly picking up on the subtle frequencies of their parents' loneliness or vulnerability. In another sibling, the signal just drops. The antenna isn't picking up the distress calls at all.
So they literally don't feel the pull to call.
Right. And the sources also mention vagal tone, referring to the vagus nerve.
Right, the nerve that runs from the brain down through the body, regulating our fight or flight response.
Exactly. A strong vagal tone acts like a shock absorber for the nervous system.
A shock absorber.
Yeah, it allows a person to sit in an uncomfortable, emotionally taxing situation, like listening to an aging parent complain about their health without their own nervous system spinning into a state of panic or deep distress.
So the sibling with the strong shock absorbers can make the weekly call.
And the sibling with weak shock absorbers feels physically overwhelmed by the interaction and pulls away.
That is wild. But it also makes it sound incredibly deterministic. Like if you were born with a weak emotional Wi-Fi antenna and you weren't deemed the designated keeper by age 10, you were just permanently locked out of this role.
I can see why it sounds that way, but
Like, do these family roles ever change, or are they set in stone forever?
they are absolutely not set in stone, and the sources explicitly warn against treating this as some kind of fixed law of physics. Family systems are incredibly dynamic. The psychological term for this fluidity is role drift.
Role drift. Okay, give me an example of how that actually plays out in reality.
There is a brilliant anecdote in the sources that perfectly illustrates this. It involves a family of 6 siblings. For years, the youngest daughter, who lived closest to the parents, was the undisputed caller.
She was the designated keeper.
Yes. But then she had twins. Her personal bandwidth completely collapsed. She went into pure survival mode, just trying to keep her own infants alive.
Which is completely understandable. So what happened? Did the parents just fall into total isolation?
You would assume the system would just fail. But instead, an older brother, who had previously been completely distant, emotionally removed, rarely called, suddenly started calling the parents every single week.
Wait, why the sudden change? Did he go to therapy or something?
No, his life phase just changed. His own children had just left home for college. He was entering an empty nest phase, becoming more reflective, and suddenly his emotional bandwidth opened up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she stepped into the role. Same parents, same childhood history, same underlying emotional economics, but a completely different set of life circumstances.
That is fascinating. It's less like a fixed theater cast where everyone has a permanent assigned role and more like, I don't know, water in a plumbing system.
That's a great way to look at it.
Like if a valve closes in one pipe because a sister gets overwhelmed with newborn twins,
Mm,
the emotional pressure naturally forces the water to find a new route.
exactly. The system needs to flow.
So an older brother suddenly steps up and takes the pressure. That actually gives me a lot of hope.
Mm.
It means the silences aren't necessarily permanent rejections.
No, the system is always seeking a new equilibrium. It's fluid.
But I do have to challenge this bandwidth argument for a second.
Okay, lay it on me.
If it's all just a fluid plumbing system based on who has the most free time on a Sunday afternoon, why do the sources, specifically the excerpts analyzing the Bomar books, suggest this pattern is a deeper, almost spiritual assignment?
Ah.
Because calling it a spiritual assignment implies something much heavier than just scheduling and bandwidth.
That is where the deep dive really elevates from clinical psychology into the philosophical frameworks of the Bomar Books library.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the analysis expands beyond just nervous systems and family schedules into the realm of human formation. The Bomar Books introduce a profound concept called the law of invisible labor.
The law of invisible labor. I'm assuming this has to do with the massive disconnect between what a parent sacrifices and what a child actually perceives.
Precisely. It's the reality that children see the visible outputs, but they are entirely blind to the invisible inputs. Well, over a 20-year period, a child sees the dinner on the table. They do not see the crushing mental load of meal planning, budgeting, and the exhaustion of cooking it after a 9-hour shift.
Right. They just see the spaghetti.
Exactly. They see the house they live in, but they don't see the silent 2.0 a.m. panic attacks the parents had about paying the mortgage.
Oh, man.
And they see a frail, elderly parent in front of them today, and they completely forget the giant who literally carried their physical body when they couldn't walk.
They forget the giant. That is a devastating way to put it. The child's memory is highly selective.
Very. The sources distill this into a single painful axiom. Love invested is not love understood.
Love invested is not love understood. Wow.
When adult children look back at their upbringing, they often remember the restrictions, the arbitrary rules, the arguments, or the things they didn't receive.
Sure, we all do that.
But the parents remember the terrified, sleepless nights staying up with a sick toddler. They remember the extra shifts worked to buy a prom dress. Gratitude and sacrifice become completely disconnected in the timeline of a family.
It's a total failure of perception.
Yeah.
And the sources argue this disconnect is actually getting worse in modern culture, right?
Yes, The Bomar books highlight a broader cultural shift from a mindset of contribution to a mindset of consumption.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning we are increasingly trained by our culture to walk into a room and ask, who is taking care of me? Instead of asking, who needs me right now?
That is so true.
We have smart homes, we have instantaneous global communication, yet we are relationally impoverished.
We have all the technology in the world to connect, but we can't manage the emotional friction of a 5-minute phone call to our own mother.
And this cultural deficit leads to the archetype of the hidden hero. The sources argue that civilizations and families, which are just micro-civilizations, do not survive because of grand, celebrated public gestures.
Right.
They survive because one person quietly upholds the structure when everyone else walks away. The child who calls is the hidden hero.
They don't get awards.
No, they rarely get a larger inheritance. They certainly don't get applause from their 5 siblings. Yet they are the ones who carry the emotional lineage of the family.
They operate on a completely different moral architecture. That one child was shaped or, allowed themselves to be shaped by a worldview that values duty, covenant, and remembrance over their own immediate convenience.
Exactly. The spiritual framing here suggests that out of the 6 children, one is uniquely wired to carry the spiritual sensitivity of the family. They hear the call.
They can physically feel the parent's loneliness across town.
Yes. It is not a boundary weakness, it is an assignment. As the sources put it, some souls are built to survive, some are built to succeed, but only a few are built to feel.
Which brings me to a major pivot in these sources that I just found fascinating.
The music.
Yeah. We've been talking about neurobiology, sociology, and clinical psychology, but suddenly the sources jump into a mythic, narrative universe to process this. Why mix hard clinical analysis with fiction and music? That feels like a massive leap.
It does feel like a leap, but
Like, how does the author process this heavy, heartbreaking message from the senior citizen with 46 descendants using a song?
because clinical data in psychological terms like diffusion of responsibility cannot hold the emotional weight of a 7-year-old's grief.
That's fair.
You can't just write a sterile white paper about the feeling of being forgotten by the children you birthed. You have to turn it into art.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources detail how the elder's message was treated as a sort of sacred download, and it prompted the creation of a mythic song concept.
Yes, a track design for a character in the Bomar books universe named Tierra Sky.
Tierra Sky.
Right. In the lore of the books, she is a mythic figure who acts as a receiver for the collective wounds of humanity. She hears the cries that nobody else hears and turns them into healing. The song concept they detail for this theme is called The One Who Calls.
And the production details for this song concept are incredibly specific. They don't just describe the lyrics, they describe the actual acoustic environment.
They do.
They mention it using a 728 hertz healing bed. We need to explain that because it sounds like sci-fi furniture.
Yeah.
What is an auditory healing bed?
It refers to sound therapy. The sources detail a track embedded with a 728 hertz frequency.
Okay, so a specific tone.
Exactly, a specific acoustic range that is often used in sonic healing because it's believed to physically lower the listener's heart rate. It acts almost like an auditory mattress meant to calm the nervous system of the person listening.
Oh, wow.
Over that frequency, the track features whisper vocals, a cinematic stillness, and lyrics that invoke the name Yehoshua to act as a guide for these lonely hearts.
So the intention isn't to solve the logistics of elder care. It is literally designed to hold space for the ache of the forgotten.
That's beautifully put.
Let me make sure I have the core hook of this song concept right, because the lyrics are just haunting. They go, let me find it. Okay. 6 little hands once reached for mine. 6 little dreams I helped to find. Now the house is quiet, the years moved on. 6 names in my heart, but only one calls home.
It is a devastating piece of poetry.
It really is.
But what is absolutely crucial to understand about this song and this entire deep dive into the quiet math of love is the tone. The song is not an angry, bitter, vindictive track demanding that the other 5 children pick up the phone and fulfill their biological duty.
Right. It's sorrowful, but it is deeply, profoundly grateful.
Yes.
The parents aren't screaming into the void, why don't all 6 call? They are whispering, thank God one does. It is a celebration of the one who reaches back across the void.
That is the ultimate resolution of the quiet mathematics of human love. It is the painful realization that love given is rarely, if ever, returned in equal measure.
No, it almost never is.
But even a fraction of it, that one voice checking in on a Sunday afternoon, can mean the absolute difference between feeling completely discarded by the world and feeling remembered.
So what does this all mean for you, listening to this right now? I think these sources challenge us to hold an incredibly uncomfortable mirror up to our own family dynamics.
I really do.
You have to look at the plumbing of your own family system and ask yourself, which role are you playing?
Right.
Are you the designated keeper, quietly carrying the emotional weight of your lineage and burning yourself out in the process?
Mm.
Or are you relying on the diffusion of responsibility?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. Are you assuming that a sister or a brother has it handled, relying on ambient updates while you dodge the emotional friction of making contact yourself?
It is an uncomfortable mirror, but it's a necessary one to look into. Because if we accept that families and society at large only survive because a few people consistently do what everyone else should have done, we have to recognize our own part in that ecosystem. The hidden heroism of checking in, of remembering the invisible labor of the giants who raised us, is literally what keeps the light from going out in their world.
It's about making the active choice to shift from asking, who is taking care of me, to who needs me right now.
And this raises an important question of thought for you to sit with after this deep dive ends.
Yeah.
If the roles we assume in our families, the faithful caller, the distant observer, the overwhelmed parent, are just unwritten agreements and systemic fluid dynamics we've settled into over time,
Right.
what happens if you break the silence today? If you change your script, push past the emotional friction, and make a call you aren't assigned to make, how might you rewrite the entire emotional inheritance of your family tomorrow?